Well, shall we begin, or do we have more coming, Viola? Should we wait more or what?
I send for all, but now
Okay.
we can start, yes.
All right, well, maybe we'll have a couple more come while I give you guys a quiz. It's been 2 weeks. Let's see how much you remember. Okay. Let's start with, because we did some history. Let's see, let me open the page here. When did the United States buy the Louisiana Territory from France?
1903.
No, close, 1803.
1803.
Yes, and that was the Louisiana Territory or the Louisiana Purchase. And can you name one war that the United States fought in the 1800s?
Vienna Civil War and
Civil War.
and
Vietnam.
Mexican, American,
Yes.
and Spanish. Spanish.
American War, yes.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Mexican.
And then the first one in the 1800s was the War of 1812.
Yeah, 1812.
And what was one of the reasons, what is one problem that caused the Civil War, that led to the Civil War?
Slavery.
Slavery, very good. Very good. And what did the Emancipation Proclamation do?
Freed the
slaves. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. President Lincoln declared that all of the slaves would be free, and it actually became a law in 1865. Let's see. Can you name one of the wars that the United States fought in the 1900s?
1900.
There were 5 of them.
Gulf War.
World War.
Mexican War.
Well, that was the 1800s. World War I and World War II were the 1900s.
Vietnam War.
War One, War Two,
Korean War, Vietnamese War.
Korean War, yes.
Vietnam War.
Vietnam, yes.
Vietnam.
Very good. Very good. And then also the Korean War. And do you remember we talked about Susan B. Anthony? What was she known for?
She fought for women's rights.
Fight for women.
We fight for civil rights.
Civil rights, yes. And most specifically for women's rights to be able to vote.
Yeah.
Yep, very good.
Women rights to vote. Yeah.
All right, well, tonight what we're going to do is we're going to go into the United States in the 1900s and then moving into the current century. And we're also going to do a little bit of geography tonight. So I'm going to put up on the screen, and we'll begin with question number 79. So if you have the papers and you want to follow along, question number 79, I'm going to share the screen now.
Excuse me, I have one question.
Yes.
Why ask about the date when American buy Louisiana from France?
Yeah. No, they won't ask you the date. I asked because I wanted to know if you could remember the two facts together, because the question will be, what did the United States buy from France in 1803? And so I just asked it backwards. I asked the question differently.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
All right. It's a good question, though. Sometimes I get tricky. Okay, question number 79. In the beginning of the 1900s, the first war that we were in was World War I, and it was a war that involved most of the world, but the United States did not join in the war in the beginning. We didn't join until almost at the end of the war, and that was because of the person who was president at that time. When he ran to become president, when he ran for office, he made the statement, "We will not get in the war, we will not get in the war." Finally, though, there was an act of war against one of our ships that was carrying passengers. And so the country then changed their mind and said, no, we need to go into this war, and Congress declared war. and in January of 1918. And the question is going to be, who was the president during this time?
Yes, thank you.
And the president during World War I was a man named Woodrow Wilson. So Woodrow Wilson is the answer you need to remember. Who was president during World War I? Woodrow Wilson. Yes. And you don't have to remember what number he was. He was the 28th president, but you will have to remember his name. Okay. And then question number 80 deals with another president. And we talked about there being World War II. And during World War II, we had the president who was elected the most times ever in our history. And his name was Franklin Roosevelt.
Roosevelt.
And it is important to remember Franklin Roosevelt because there were two Roosevelts that were presidents. One of them was president before Woodrow Wilson in 1900, and his name was Theodore Roosevelt. That's not the question. The question has to do with World War II and the Depression. Who was the president then? It's Franklin Roosevelt. So I don't want you to get confused with the Roosevelts. And he was the president who was elected to serve the most years as any president ever has, and he died when he was in office in 1945. And his vice president became president when he died. So Woodrow Wilson is the answer to number 79. First World War. Second World War is Franklin Roosevelt. Any questions on those? Okay. Now, with Franklin Roosevelt, they won't ask you this question this way, but they may want to make sure that you understand things about him. So my suggestion would be you read the paragraph that says that he had what was called the New Deal. He started the Social Security Administration, and he was the president through almost all of the war, the Second World War. So those are just some facts you may want to know. But the question is, what was his name? And I think all of you will remember that. Question number 81 is, who did the United States fight in World War II? And there were three main countries that were part of what they called the Axis. We were called the Allies, and they were called the Axis. And the Axis were three countries, Japan, Germany, and Italy. And you will have to remember all three. You can't just remember one of these. You will need to know all of them. So when it asks the question, who did the United States fight in World War II? You will need to answer Japan, Germany, and Italy. The rest of the world, France, England, Greece, Canada, the rest of the world were fighting against those three countries. And we joined in it, which is why it was called a world war. Okay, any questions on that? All right, now during World War II, there were many leaders. There was one leader who was in charge of all of the allies, meaning all the other countries who were fighting against Japan, Germany, and Italy. He also became a president. When he was in the war, World War II, he was a general, and he was the highest ranking general. And so all of the other countries reported to him during our what we call D-Day, when the invasion of Normandy took place and the European continent was once again taken by the Allies. And his name was Eisenhower. He was both a president and a general. And before he was president, Eisenhower was a general in what war? You need to be able to remember it was World War II. World War II. He was in World War I because he was a young man then. But the question number 82 wants to know, when he was both a general and he also became a president, what war was he in? And World War II is when he was the leader of it. Does that make sense?
No, I don't.
Go
I
ahead.
don't understand 82. Can you
Yes.
explain more?
One of our presidents was named Dwight David Eisenhower.
Okay.
Before he became president, he was the general leading all of the armies in World War II. And the question is, what war was he in? What war was he the leader in? And you need to remember World War II. And he was a man who was president right after I was born. So he was a president in the middle of the last century. But the question is, what war was he in? And you need to remember World War II. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, besides World War II, and remember we talked about there being 5 conflicts or 5 wars: World War I, World War II, Korean, Vietnam, and the Persian Gulf War. So those 5 wars. But there's another term that we use that was very popular in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and it was a term, the Cold War. It's because there were no weapons that were fired. There was, it was mostly a political war, and it was fought between communism and the free world. And the question number 83 has to deal with that. During the Cold War, what was the main concern of the United States? And the answer is communism, or the spread of communism. We, our political system, our market economy, our Republican government, and democracy are opposed to communism.
فيولا ممكن تترجمي فيولا؟
Viola, can you help translate the
Yeah. كوميونيزم اللي هي مقصود بيها الشيوعية.
الشيوعية؟
الترن بتاع اليو اس اي في الوقت دوت، الحرب دي ما كانش فيها أسلحة، ما كانش فيها مدافع، ما كانش فيها أي حرب، لكن كانت بتحارب إيه؟ كانت بتحارب الشيوعية اللي هي كوميونيزم. فعشان كده اسمها كولد وور. كولد وور اللي هي ما كانش فيها أسلحة، ما كانش فيها أي استخدام أسلحة، مدافع ولا طيران ولا أي حاجة. بس هي كانت في حرب ضد الشيوعية.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we call it a war, but there were no shots fired. We had enemies, but we were protecting freedom, and it was done in a political way.
Teacher,
Yes.
can we say that U.S. System is capitalism?
Yes.
So it's another, but this is positive word, right? Like in a state of market economy, if we use the capitalism, like, is it okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Very good.
Yes.
Okay. Question number 84. What movement tried to end racial discrimination? And I know that, Viola, you can translate this for them, but discrimination is something that is very important to our free country, because we believe everyone should be given an equal chance, an equal opportunity. And if someone is pushed down just simply because of race or color or anything like that, we are opposed to that kind of discrimination. And the question number 84 has to do with understanding racial discrimination.
المقصود بيها الديسكريمينيشن اللي هي العنصرية. فاللي كانت الحركة ديت علشان تلغي موضوع العنصرية. لا اللون يفرق ولا الجنس يفرق ولا في حاجة تفرق، المهم ان الكل متساوي. فريشال ديسكريمينيشن اللي هي إزالة العنصرية. انهاء موضوع العنصرية بين السود والبيض والكلام ده كله، عبيد وكله يعني.
In our country, before the 1950s and 60s, people who were from African American descent or Black people, they were in separate schools, and they were in separate, they had to sit in separate places on buses, and they were treated poorly and treated like they were lesser people. And it was wrong, but that's the way the country was at the time. And even though they were freed as slaves in the Civil War, which was 100 years before, people still discriminated or still treated them poorly, like they were not equal citizens. and that was wrong. And so there was a movement called the Civil Rights Movement to earn equality for those who had been treated in a discriminating way. And so what movement tried to end racial discrimination? The term we use for that is the Civil Rights Movement.
When is that movement? When was that?
That happened in the 50s and 60s of last century. So the 1950s and 1960s.
1954 began.
In 1964, a document was signed and passed by Congress called the Civil Rights Act, which made it illegal when hiring people, when allowing them to buy a home, when allowing them to buy a car. It made it illegal for you to treat one race differently than another race. So for example, all of you who are coming to this country, people can look at you and say, oh, you're Arabic, or you could even say from a specific country, you're Egyptian, so I'm not going to sell to you because you're Egyptian. That is illegal in this country because of the Civil Rights Act. You cannot treat one ethnic group differently or more poorly than another. You can't show favoritism to one over another. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I understand. Thumbs up, Farzana.
Because I make silent. My kids makes more voice noises. I'm muted.
Okay. Well, I heard you now.
Yes, I can do it.
Yeah. So it's really important in this country. In fact, there are still disagreements when people seem to treat others as lesser than themselves. And of course, for those of us who follow the Bible says there's no one better than the other. We're all equal. We're all the same in God's eyes. During the Civil Rights Movement, there was one man who became the leader of those who wanted to get things changed. His name was Martin Luther King Jr. He was a pastor, he was a preacher, a minister in the South, and he was a Black man. And he very peacefully, he never used force. He gathered people together and they made their feelings known. They would stand in front of places and cause it to be called attention to that they were discriminating. They would march. There were famous marches. I remember these vividly, marches from one city to another, but they were all peaceful protests. And we have a right in this country to peacefully protest. Now, that doesn't make people happy all the time. So there are people who get upset and get angry, and they may throw rocks at them. They may do all sorts of things. But Martin Luther King Jr., he fought for civil rights. He did not raise guns and shoot at anybody, but he was one who marched. And I'll give you an example, a very famous example. There was a diner, a restaurant where only Black people or only white people had been served in the past. Well, one of the statements that they made was a lot of Black young students went into the same restaurant and sat down to be served. Well, the owner of the restaurant said, no, you have to get out of here. They sat there. The police finally came and arrested them. The reason it made news is because there were other parts of the country, like California, where that didn't happen. And it should have been the same everywhere, where no one was treated more poorly than the other. So those kinds of demonstrations, which were done peacefully, caused the public to realize we need to change the system. And so the Civil Rights Act went into effect in 1964. Number 85 is, what did Martin Luther King Jr. do? He did a lot, because he was the one who led the effort to make sure that everyone got equal treatment. And
He's a good leader. He was a good leader.
He was a good leader. He was assassinated because he was a good leader. There were people who disagreed with what he was doing. And one man, James Earl Ray is his name, decided he wanted to kill him. And so he did. And he was shot and he was killed. And he was, I think he was only 39 years old. Yeah, he was 39 years old when he died. That's a young man. Well, compared to me and compared to some others, that's a very young man.
Yes, it's very young.
So he was an important one to remember, and they won't, they will not be too strict on this one. If they ask you this question, what did Martin Luther King Jr. do? If you said he fought for civil rights, that would be enough. You wouldn't have to go into any more detail than that. He worked for equality for all Americans. Both of those mean the same thing.
Please, how can we apply PDF this book, please?
How can we apply what?
The PDF, this book. This
I will
book.
send it to you right now.
You read.
I will send it
PDF,
to you right now.
Oh, I see. Okay.
مين asking?
He needs
مين اللي
PDF.
بيسأل دلوقتي؟
أنا عبد المسيح جوز نادية.
طب ابعتهولك دلوقتي، ما انا حطاه على الفيسبوك. قصدي
طيب.
على الجروب مسج، ابعتهولك دلوقتي. حاضر.
طيب شكرا يا أختي.
اوكي.
Okay. If Viola will get it to you.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Yes, because you will want this for study purposes, so you can even study more. And then also just remind everybody the videos are available for each class that we have.
Yeah.
And I know Viola sends those out to you, the links to you.
Right on.
Yes.
I don't have the link.
What's that?
I don't have the
I
link
will
for
not
video.
use us في ال
Okay, she will send those to you, and after
In
each
our
class,
group.
I make a new video, so.
Okay.
Farzana, keep my phone number and
Okay.
send me text message. I will send you all this.
I have your phone number. I have your WhatsApp. All about you.
You are already in WhatsApp group?
Yes, I don't have the
I
WhatsApp
already
group.
put
No,
all
I'm
video
not in
this
WhatsApp group.
Yeah, she's not in the group though, Viola.
Yeah, just I have Viola's number.
Okay, let me check if you I have your number or not.
Yeah, you can add her to the WhatsApp group, then everybody gets them.
Right now.
Yes.
Farzana?
Okay. I'm going to go to the next one. Question number 86. What
Farzana,
major event happened on September 11th, 2001?
Farzana Nadim?
Yes.
Okay.
And the answer to that is terrorists attacked the United States.
Bin Laden, yes.
Yes.
Airplane crashed.
Yep, Osama bin Laden, the Al-Qaeda. I mean, there's different names that have been applied to it. And here's the important thing that when they ask this question, since many of you come from Arabic countries and many of you are Muslim in your background, in your heritage, even if you're not practicing Muslims, you need to know that we in the United States do not think it was Muslims who attacked us. Do not think it was Arabic people who attacked us. They were terrorists who attacked us. And we know the difference. And so when you answer, you don't need to feel offended or anything. When you answer the question, what happened on September 11, 2001? The correct answer is terrorists attacked the United States. They were extremists, and they killed almost 3,000 people in the two towers. It was a very sad day for many nationalities because the people who were in those towers came from many different countries. And the attack happened on our soil, but it was a very sad day. So you just need to know that most of us Americans, we just realized they were terrorists. They were bad people from the beginning as far as we were concerned. So that's 86. You just terrorists attacked the United States, and they won't ask you any more details than that. But you need to know that 2 planes went into the towers, and then one went into the Pentagon, and then the passengers on one of the planes took over the plane and had it go down in Pennsylvania. So there were 4 planes that were part of the weapons used on that day. Very sad day.
Yes, I was too young at that age, at that time. And I don't want to remember that. It was a sad day for me. It was too bad.
Yeah, it was in this country, it made everybody very frightened. And here's the difference. Many of you come from countries where you know what it is to be in fear of war all the time. Most Americans felt they were safe because we were far away from any danger happening, like many of you come from. And the reality is nobody in this world is far away from any danger.
Yes.
And so, and the fact that they actually did it on our soil made people even more fearful. And airports put new security in. I mean, there were all sorts of things that were done. And the important thing is we all learned from it. The sad thing is we lost many people to learn the lesson. So that's question 86. Question 87. Name, okay, this is going to be hard for you because these pronunciations are not easy. You need to name one American Indian tribe in the United States. They will give you a list and you will have to know one of the names and be able to say it. And I'm going to read these names. Can you all see them on your screen? Right here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go through and I'm going to read these one right after the other so that you hear the pronunciation. So that when he shows you a list or she shows you a list during your test, Viola, did they give you a list of the Indian tribes? Was this one of your questions?
No.
Okay. Well, and we don't know which questions they're going to ask you, but if they do, I want you to feel comfortable pronouncing the names. And all you have to do is remember the easiest one for you to pronounce, but they will give you a list to read from, and I'm going to pronounce them beginning here. Cherokee, Cheyenne, Navajo, Arawak, Sioux, Shawnee, Chippewa, Mohegan, Choctaw, Huron, Pueblo, Oneida, Apache, Lakota, Iroquois, Crow, Creek, Teton, Blackfeet, Hopi, Seminole, and Inuit. There are many more tribes, but those are the names. Now, here is one where you may want to get the video and look at it again so you can hear the pronunciation over and over again. And I know that because of many of these words aren't English. We have adopted these words that came from Native American languages, but some of them also came from French. And for example, Iroquois was the name given to an Indian tribe that came from the French. So there's no one language that makes this easy to understand.
The easiest one, Blackfeet.
What's
And
that?
Apache.
Easiest one, Blackfeet.
I choose Blackfeet.
Yeah,
And Apache. It's so easy.
Blackfeet is easy.
yeah. Blackfeet and Apache are two that everybody
Yeah,
seems to want to
Apache.
remember.
Yeah.
Cherokee.
Yeah,
عربية شروكي.
yeah. They're funny names. For some of us, like myself, I have Native American heritage, and my tribe isn't even on here. My tribe is Potawatomi, which is not even mentioned here, although they were part of the Sioux Nation, one in the top row there. Anyway, so that is the last question that has to do with politics, with history, anything geopolitical. Now we go into geography, because we don't want any of you to get lost when you travel in the United States.
Mhm.
And
Mr. Mike, do you know my son is 4th grade, and every day I practice with him geography, history, everything you teach me, and he teaches me again.
oh, very good, very good. Yes, where the parent becomes the student.
Yes.
Yes.
Now they are in gold rush.
Oh, yes, 1840s in California. Yes. And for me, one of the advantages I have is I like history. Some people don't like history. I like history, so I enjoy talking about it. But there are many people who don't. So now when we get into geography, there's certain things that they want to make sure you understand. They want you to understand where the east and the west is and what oceans we have on either side. They want you to understand the major rivers that run through the country. They want you to know the names of the states that border the other countries. For example, we have Canada on the north, and you need to be able to name states that are along the Canadian border. And then we have Mexico at the south, and they want you to be able to name states that are along the Mexican border. So they want to make sure that you understand where the United States is. In addition to that, we have 2 states that are not connected to the rest of the 48. One of those states is Alaska, and it's way up north. And on a map, when they show Alaska, they usually show it separated, but people don't know where it belongs because it's just separated. The other state is Hawaii, and it's way out in the ocean. It's 5 hours away from California by an airplane. So it's a long ways away out in the ocean. So we have 2 states that aren't connected to the other states. So we have 48, and they call those 48 contiguous states, which means they're connected. So we're going to take a look at a map. I'm going to turn this the other direction. There we go. Take a look at the map. And this is in your book also, but I'm going to enlarge it. And I'm just going to go over some basic things. Then we will look at the questions, okay?
Alaska and Hawaii are located in the water, yes.
Yeah, well, Alaska is connected to Canada. This right over here, I don't know if you can see it, but this part over here is Canada.
Okay.
And this is Alaska. And then Hawaii is out in the water. You are correct.
Yes.
So the state of Alaska.
The beautiful state in United States is Hawaii.
It is a
The
very
most
beautiful state. It is very tropical
Yes.
and very humid, but it is beautiful. Yes, if you ever get a chance to take a vacation there, you would
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Of course.
But Alaska connected to Canada? Not to
Alaska is
America?
connected to Canada. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In fact, north, this whole area north of the United States has Canada as the neighboring country. And one of the questions is you have to name, I think it's 3 states that go along the Canadian border. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to pronounce the names of the states. Okay. And when we did the 13 colonies, you had to remember the names of some of the colonies. Now you have to remember the names of these states that go along. And I'm going to read it so that you hear the pronunciation. We have Washington, D.C., which is where our capital for our government is, but we also have Washington as a state. And Washington State is north of California, just to give you guys orientation. This is California down here. And Washington State is north of that along the Canadian border. And then next to Washington is Idaho. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. That's the purple right here, Idaho. Then next, and you can see there's a little portion of that
Yes.
that goes to Canada. Next to that is Montana. And then next to Montana is North Dakota. Next to that is Minnesota. And next to that is the state where my wife was born, Wisconsin. Next to that is Michigan. And there's a little bit of Indiana that goes on the Great Lakes, but it doesn't touch Canada. But over here on this side, we have Ohio, and there is a part of that that goes to Canada. And then we have Pennsylvania. And then my daughter lives here in New York. Then up here we have Vermont. Then we have a little bit of the state of New Hampshire. And we have Maine. And you'll need to remember, if I remember right, it's 3 states. We'll look at the question in a minute. But I just wanted to pronounce those so that you would understand how to pronounce the names of the states. We have a very large border with Canada. Now, when you go south, Mexico is down here. And that's the other international border we have. And the states that border Mexico are California,
California,
Arizona.
Arizona, New Mexico,
Mexico.
and Texas. So we have 4 states, and I think you have to remember 1 or 2 of them. But when we get to the questions, we'll look at that. So those are the states on our north and our south borders. We have 2 oceans that border us. We have one on the west side, which is the Pacific Ocean, and one on the east side, which is the Atlantic Ocean. In fact, I'm going to show you this next picture here. And you can see it says Atlantic Ocean and Pacific Ocean. And if you look up, can you see okay?
Yeah, one of my question in the test. What is the East Coast? East Ocean.
What is the East Ocean? That was your question?
Yes.
And I assume you got it right because you were perfect, right?
Atlantic Ocean.
Yes. And you can see the Canadian border up here. And then if you look at Alaska, because I think it was Hannah, you mentioned it, you can see where this is Alaska here, and the white part is Canada.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we have some other bodies of water that are around the country, but they are not oceans. We have the Gulf of Mexico down here. Find my mouse. There we go. We have the Gulf of Mexico down here, and we have lakes, which are called the Great Lakes. We have Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, and Lake Erie. Okay, and any map of the United States that you look at in a book or online will show all of those bodies of water. They don't change in name. There's no other way to say them. So it's the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Great Lakes. Now there are 2 main rivers, very large rivers in the United States. One of them is the Mississippi, and it is the longest one. And it goes from Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico down here. That's where it starts. And it goes all the way up into North Dakota. And that is called the Mississippi River. You can see the arrow pointing to it right here. And Mississippi isn't a hard word to say necessarily. It's just a confusing word to spell. M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-P-P-I. It's got a lot of repeat letters in it. The other river that is large in the United States is called the Missouri River. And that is
Missouri.
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 Missouri. And I'm going to enlarge that so you can see how it's spelled.
Missouri.
Missouri.
Missouri or Mississippi.
And we have a state named Missouri, which is where the city of St. Louis is. And it is right down here. And that is where the river begins, which is why it has the name, the Missouri River.
Teacher,
Yes.
in the past, I remember, I think in the English book that we study, I don't know, like 10, 15 years before, they talk about the longest river, Mississippi. But now it looks like the other one, like the Missouri is the longest.
The Missouri is long, but I may be wrong. I'll have to look it up. I still believe the Mississippi is the longest one because it goes down further south. But I'll look that up and find out. That's a good question, Razul. I'll find out and let you know. Okay, so those are the bodies of water. So now we'll go back to the questions, and you have had some of an orientation. So these should be a little bit easier for you to answer. Let's go back up here. Yeah, all right. Question 88. Name one of the 2 longest rivers in the United States.
Missouri and Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Missouri and Mississippi, correct. All right, and as long as you can remember which side of the country is the east and which is the west, you'll do very good for the next 2 questions. What ocean is on the west coast, the California coast? What ocean is on the California coast or the west coast? Pacific Ocean. And what ocean is on the east coast? The Atlantic Ocean. And do you know which is the larger ocean? This is not on your test. I'm just asking.
Pacific.
You know which is larger?
No,
Black.
Pacific.
Pacific. Oh,
The Pacific, yes.
Where
And
was
if you get a globe or you get a map of the world, you can see that there's so much going all the way over to Asia and Australia. That's all Pacific Ocean.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the next question is name one U.S. territory. When the United States in the 1800s and early 1900s were at war with different countries, the Spanish-American War, and other wars, we ended up inheriting or getting territories during those treaties. These are not countries. These are lands that are not part of the mainland of the United States, but we have the governing body over them. We govern these places. There are several of them, and they're listed here. You need to remember one of these. In fact, you know what? I have a map. If you'll just bear with me for a minute, let me.
Send me a hand.
There we go. I can show you where these territories are. Okay,
What
by the
is
way, you can see
territories?
territory.
Can you explain about territory? What
يعني ايه معناها فيولا؟
Territory. Okay.
Yeah, a territory is a place, a geographic location that has people living in it that we own, we are responsible for. For example, you all live, I think you all live in California. If you owned a home in New York, you would have, so to speak, a territory there that you own, as well as you own whatever you have here in California. The territories are not close by, they're far away. In fact, there are American citizens living in those territories, but they're not part of the United States, they're not states.
Okay.
يعني هم خارج الولايات المتحدة، بس أمريكا تمتلك المقاطعات دي اللي هي بورتريكو مثلا، واللي هم مكتوبين بالأخضر دول.
بورتريكو دولة
هم ملك أمريكا، أمريكا مشترياهم، بس هم خارج
الحدود، هم بره حدود أمريكا.
خارج
خارج الحدود، بس هم أمريكا.
ملك الأمريكا.
Okay, thank you.
And you,
Farzana?
Yes.
Territory قلمرو, you know, domain, range. يعني تا اینجاش مربوط ما میشه.
And you can see where they are. This is Puerto Rico, which is near Cuba. We have the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is near that. We have a few, the red ones here, that where no one lives. They're uninhabited territories. Then out in the Pacific Ocean, we have an area called the American Samoa, the Samoan Islands. We have Wake Island, which no one lives on. Then we have two of them over here, the North Mariana Islands and Guam. Guam. Okay, so let me go back to the question. And it says name one U.S. territory. And they won't put a list in front of you. You just need to remember Puerto Rico. For people on the East Coast, that's the easiest one to remember because there are a lot of Puerto Ricans on the East Coast. For many of you, Guam may be the easiest one to remember, but you just have to remember one of them. U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and the Northern Mariana Islands. Those are the choices. Okay, now, remember the states that I walked through for you to know the names? Name, oh, you only have to name one. Name one state that borders Canada. And all of these states, I showed you where they are the choices you have. Okay.
You said Alaska is near to the Canada, right?
Say again, I'm sorry.
You said Alaska is near to the Canada,
yes,
right?
Alaska borders Canada. It does.
Also Washington, you said.
Yeah, Washington.
DC.
Washington, D.C.
Washington State,
Washington State. Okay.
not Washington DC, Washington State.
Okay, Washington State.
And then here's the list of the other names: Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Alaska. So those are all the states. You just have to remember one of those. And so if you remember Washington, then you'll be doing fine. In fact, there are, I think, if I counted right, there are 7 questions that have an answer to it, which is Washington. Who was the first president? Washington. There are several where he is the answer. So if you can remember one word, you get 7 of them right.
Yeah.
You just have to remember which question they go to. Now, on the Mexican border, question 93 is, name one state that borders Mexico. And there are 4 choices. California, and since most of you in California, that's the easy one to remember. But Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas are the other choices.
Yeah.
New Mexico.
Okay, now, in our country, we have only one national capital where our federal government resides, and that is Washington, D.C. So when they ask you, what is the capital of the whole United States? The answer is Washington, D.C. Okay, let's see. And then we'll end with 95, question 95. We'll go to the symbols and do that next time.
Teacher,
Yes.
what is the DC abbreviate for? Stand for?
It stands for District of Columbia, because
Okay.
Washington is considered a district, not a state.
Okay.
And the name is very old, District of Columbia. It goes way back to the colonial days.
As long as we know, I think that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. White House, Pentagon.
What is what?
She had the White House and the Pentagon
Yes.
and
Oh, yeah.
different places for the government. I saw
Exa-
everything. I liked it.
Yeah, oh, it's fantastic to tour and
Yeah.
see all of the monuments and
Yeah.
everything. They're beautiful. They're beautiful.
It have a huge building. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, in fact, when you think of other countries that have structures that people want to go visit and see, you think of the Taj Mahal in India,
Yeah.
or you think of the Arc de Triomphe in France or Paris, or you think of the pyramids in Egypt.
Yeah.
And by the way, all of those I have been pleasured to be able to visit. But
Oh.
when you go to the United States Capitol, Washington, D.C., you get to see the Capitol building, you get to see
White House.
monuments, Washington's monument, all sorts of monuments, and it's a beautiful place to visit. That is our, where we have pride. We take a lot of pride in remembering our history, even though our history is much, much smaller than, say, Egypt's history or France's history.
Yeah. I went
teacher.
yesterday,
White
last year.
House.
White House too, yes.
Teacher, I
Yes.
heard, I don't know, maybe real, maybe not. I heard the Taj Mahal, when they built the building,
Yes,
instead of liquid, they used the liquid, you know, the egg, the liquid from egg. They use this as a cementitious material, you know. That's why the building is, you know, keep together.
well, if you ever have an opportunity to go to Agra, which is the city that the Taj Mahal is in,
Uh-huh.
they still show how the workers assembled all of the marble and they inlaid all of the precious jewels. There's they used I don't remember what they used as the cement for it, but they stacked and put the marble together in an amazing way. It took
Yeah.
20,000 workers 20 years to build it.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's amazing to see.
Yeah.
Okay, the last one, 95. Where is the Statue of Liberty? Now, do you know what the Statue of Liberty is?
New York.
Yeah, it is in New York, and that's the question. There are different ways to say where it is. You can say New York Harbor. You can say it's on Liberty Island. You can say it's near New York City. All of those are geographic answers that are correct, but it is a symbol of freedom.
Statue of Freedom. Yeah.
Yes, it is a Statue of Freedom. In the early 1900s, it was actually erected in the late 1800s, but in the early 1900s, when so many immigrants were leaving Europe and coming, when they arrived in New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty was the thing they saw first that made them realize they were entering a free country, because many of them left countries that were not free. During World War II, when the Nazis were invading Europe, many immigrants came from Europe to the United States, and the symbol of freedom to them was seeing the Statue of Liberty when the ships would pull into the harbor. So it's very, in our history, a very important place. And if you go to the island that it's located, Liberty Island, or Ellis Island is what it's called sometimes, there are books and records you can look at that have listed the names of ancestors who came in through New York Harbor. And so if someone is from, I'll say, Czechoslovakia, and they had family who came here in 1912, they can go there and look up the names and the signatures of their relatives when they first arrived. So for some people, it's an important part of their heritage. And the Statue of Liberty was a gift to us in the 1870s from the French government because of our leadership in the world in demonstrating what a democracy stands for. So that's the Statue of Liberty. You have now digested, you have eaten 95 questions. Do you feel full?
Yes.
It was nice. All of them was very interesting.
So now next week, we will deal with the symbols, which doesn't take very much time. And then what I'm going to do is start going through the application to help you understand how to complete the application if you have not filled it out. And if you have questions about the application, one of the things you need to know is some of your reading and some of your vocabulary may come directly from the application. They may ask you to read portions right off of it. Viola, you want to say something about that?
Actually, the vocabulary you gave it to us.
بالعربي يا فيولا بقى.
هو بيقول ان انتوا دلوقتي اعطيتكم اسئله كتيره لغايه 95 فهيوقف لغايه كده والمره الجايه هياخد السيمبل اللي هي الرموز.
هو بيتكلم عن الاختبار بيبقى نوعين وبيطلب منك
فدول 5 اسئله بس فهيدخل بعد كده في الابلكيشن.
طيب
Did they give you a vocabulary list, Viola?
Yes.
And did they have you read from the vocabulary list?
Yeah. Actually, the question he asked me to read, what is the first president?
Ah, okay. So
I think
the first president.
All right. So it's straight from the test.
No, sorry. Who is George Washington?
Who was George Washington? Okay.
Yeah, and the written Washington is the first president.
Washington?
Yeah.
Very good. So we
في answering he didn't say George. In answering he told me Washington is the first president and I wrote it.
يلا شو سألوكي بالابليكيشن؟ سألوكي على المعاني؟
في الابليكيشن لا ما سألونيش معاني خالص. Have you ever دي كلها نو. وكانت أسئلة بس
هو الابلكيشن ده ممكن تقولي عبارة عن ايه يا فيولا؟
Because the letter there is a list about the paper you have document you have to take.
Yeah, and
letter for appointment letter, and you have to take ID, and you have to take green card. I advise all of you, you have to take paperwork or document to approve that you pay tax or you filing tax annually. At least the last year. Because he asked me about due to the governor money. I said, no, I paid the tax. I filed tax annually.
هو الباسبور
You have a paper to approve this. Actually, I had it on the time. So
yeah, your tax return proves to them whether you still owe the government money.
yes.
How many years for tax return?
Last year only.
Just the last year is
Only
enough.
1 year?
Yeah.
Last year only.
الباسبور المصري بيبقى مطلوب.
He took it from me and make copy and give me the original in the same time.
مدام فيولا الباسبور بناخده معانا ولا لا؟ الباسبور المصري بناخده معانا؟
only in case of he wanted to check how many time you went out and admission.
Yeah.
طيب
اوكي.
يا اخت فيولا بيسالوا على قسيمه الجواز بتاعتي انا ومراتي ولا لا؟
انا ما اتسالتش فيها لان اوريدي عندهم من الجرين كارد.
ايوه.
Yeah, and next week, we will go through what you need to have with you when you go for your interview, but we will also go through understanding how to fill out the application. Maybe I should ask, have all of you filled out the application, or do we even need to go through that? Are you already through that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Some of them not yet.
Some not yet, okay.
We are doing it right now. We fill the form and maybe we need some help.
Okay. All right, well, here's what I will offer. We can separately, if you need to, go through your application to help you complete it so that it is completed correctly, or we can do it as a class. It's fine with me either way, but I also don't want to be boring to those of you who have already filled out the application and sent it in. So when we meet next week, we will talk about the things you need to take, and we will go through questions that you may have about the application. But if you need personal help filling it out, then we can do that separately so we don't take everybody's time.
Separately.
Okay,
But
that's fine.
you have more time. But you have one question. What
Sure.
about what does government? What does taxes? What I can answer?
I'm not sure I understand which question. Go.
What does government?
What is the title of government now? Is that right?
هو مش هيسألك على التاكس، هو عايز النسخة من التاكس.
بس
لا
دي
لا بسأل على التايتل.
أنا بسأل إذا سألني شو معنات الحكومي أو سألني شو معنات التاكس. You understand what this tax
أنا
mean?
متهيألي مش هيسألها عن التاكس معناه إيه.
تسألني
هو عايز. She asking about what means about the tax. Maybe she had a question like
or
that.
benefit.
Yeah, if you have been working in the United States, you have been earning money, and if you've been earning money, then you should have been paying taxes. And every year, with the earnings that you have, you need to file with the government how much money you earned, and then they get to look and see if you have paid all of your taxes or if you even owe any taxes. And if you do, what they want to know when you go for your interview is that you have no outstanding taxes that you have not paid, because you cannot become a citizen and have debt to the government. Does that make sense?
No understand.
This is very important.
Viola, بس
All you will
I
ask
want short answers. You know?
he ask you ان انت عليك ديون للحكومة هتقولي له
نو بس اذا سالني مثلا شو معنات التاكس او شو معنات
كده لا هيقول لك can you approve are you paying filing tax annually هتقولي yes.
بس فيولا بيسالونا في سؤال، بيسالونا انتوا دفعتوا التاكس؟ مثل انا ما عم بشتغل ما عم بدفع التاكس، ابني عم يدفع التاكس.
ما فيش مشكله، هتوري له ان ابني انت انكلودد مع ابنك.
يعني شو بدي اقول له؟ بقول له يس مثلا انه ابني عم يدفع التاكس.
My son, yes, I am included in my son.
اوكي.
طبعا
فينا نقول I am share with my husband not included او jointly
with my husband.
share فيني اقول كلمة share ولا لا؟
Yeah, filing jointly means that your incomes are combined when you file your taxes.
وشو معنات benefit؟
When your test يا جمانة؟
ها؟
When is your test?
After 2 days.
Oh, good luck.
Okay, Jomana, let me make a suggestion. Because Viola has recently been through the test, my suggestion would be that you get her on the phone, just the two of you, so that you can hear each other clearly, and you go through whatever questions you still have, so that you're able to answer them confidently.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so.
Okay.
Right, and for the rest of you, that's all for tonight. We will see you next week. We will go over the symbols and the holidays, and then we will talk about the application and what you need, what documents you need to take with you when you go. And Jomana, you will have already had your test, so we will get to hear good results from you.
Thank you so much.
Good luck to Jumana.
Yes, good luck to you. We will be praying for you.
عند الامتحان
أنا
بكرة
بدي أسأل جمانة سؤال، كم شهر حتى طلبوك يا جمانة؟ من وقت
تقريبا صار سنة ونص
سنة ونص؟
زمان.
فيولا أنا من حقي أسأل معنى السؤال، يعني I can ask him what the meaning of the question، يعني أنا ممكن أسأله مرة واثنين ولا نو؟
لا ممكن هي طبعا بيتوقف على شخصية الممتحن.
طب فيولا في أنا وراجعه معه عشان أتذكر كل شيء.
تراجعين مع مين يا جمانة؟
هاي مو هو الأوفيسر بيمسك هذا الابلكيشن تبعي، بده يراجعه على اللابتوب تبعه.
طبعا ده
أنا
لازم.
الأوراق مو معي، أنا فيني
هو
أقدر أفتح
بيراجعها على
الأوراق،
الكمبيوتر.
فيني أفتح الأوراق بإيدي إنه معي الأوراق بس مو مكتوبة.
لا ما تفتحيش حاجة خالص ولا تمسكي أي ورقة معاكي.
هذا ممنوع
طبعا.
أوكي.
ويلا
وقت بيسأل بالابليكيشن بحط صورة السؤال على الكمبيوتر مشان تشوفه هي ولا بس؟
لا. هو الابلكيشن اونلي هيسألك في الانفورميشن بيرسونال انفورميشن،
بس هذا على اليوتيوب معقدينه كثير.
your social number, your address, when you became lawful permanent resident. دول الأسئلة الأساسية.
هو كم سؤال الابلكيشن يا فيولا؟
50.
كبيرة 40 سؤال.
50.
والعادي الثاني 100 مش كده؟ هم دول اللي احنا بنحفظهم. في حاجة تانية غيرهم؟
6 أسئلة لو جاوبتهم كلهم صح خلاص. فيهم غلط هيكمل لغاية لما أسألك 10 أسئلة تكوني مجاوبة منهم 6 صح. فعندك فرصة 4 تجاوبيهم غلط، مش مشكلة.
بس هي دي عدد الأسئلة 100 اللي احنا بنذاكرهم مع مستر مايك، والابلكيشن اللي هم 50 كويشن بس كده، مفيش حاجة تاني. في ناس بتتكلم عن 400 سؤال، أنا مش عارفة إيه ده اللي بيبقى على اليوتيوب.
لا في الريدنج والرايتنج.
ريدنج ورايتنج هو جملة من الأسئلة نفسها.
هذا الابلكيشن أنا 400 هي عم تحكي، كان فكر 400 سؤال.
إيه 400؟ أنا سمعت الجملة دي.
The name of application in 400 but there is no 400 question.
really؟ طيب يعني هما مش كده.
الاسم تبعه هيك
400. Yes.
اوكي شكرا فيولا خالص، شكرا.
مايك
هو ماشي مستر مايك من بدري.
لا انا شايفاه اهو، ده هو
اللي
اوكي
انا مش شايفاه
اهو بس هي الصورة بس مطفية الكاميرا.
اوكي يلا تصبحوا على خير كلكم. يلا
باي
باي
شكرا كثير. شكرا كثير. باي.